super luxurious hospitality areas and double out to see round 7 on the 2.9-mile full Grand Prix circuit. But there's trouble on the grid as they get ready for the assembly lap. Nick May's Maserati bi-turbo doesn't seem to want to go. All the others are getting away. And Godfrey Hall's BMW M3 is being pushed away. But the other 35 are on their way to the rolling start for the 15-lap race in absolutely perfect weather conditions. And here we are in the 2.3-litre BMW M3 of the reigning British Touring Car champion Frank Sittner. But after 6 rounds of this year's contest, it's Frank's teammate James Weaver in the white BMW M3 on the left in front who's leading overall. So Frank has sportingly agreed to play a supporting role to James for the rest of the season. Now that's nice for James, but it's a bit tough on all the rest of us who've so enjoyed their vigorous jousting for class victory. And here they come, dutifully following the Rover Vitesse pace car. For the 5th time this year, Andy Rouse in pole position. 4 more really hot shoes in rows 3 and 4, all in Ford Sierra Cosworths, followed by 4 more of the all-conquering Sierras, which occupy the top 13 grid places. Leading the way round in his blue and white Caliber Ford has totally demoralised the opposition before the race even begins, with a stunning pole position lap over a second faster than the lap record and 8/10 faster than round 3 winner, number 7, Tim Harvey, alongside him on the right. So it looks as though Andy's regained his old form. But here's something new, the thrilling view from the headlight position of jovial Jerry Marnie's Sierra Cosworth, 11th on the grid, with Mike Smith and Sean Walker ahead of us on the run-up to the start. Out of Bridge Corner, up to Woodcote. Front row, Rouse and Harvey. Second row, Bristow and Gravett. All the winners from the previous 6 rounds in the first 2 rows. And behind them, Edwards, Good, Newman, Smith and Walker. Pace car rolls round to Woodcote. Into the pit lane, the race is on. Andy Rouse leads, Tim Harvey alongside him. Gravett into 3rd position, Bristow 4th, Good 5th. Copse Corner, Rouse holds the inside vital line. Harvey next, then it's Gravett on to Maggots. The first 3 round together. And all the rest of them. And there's a spinner. It's Mike Smith. Mike Smith spins in the Cartel Sierra, regains the circuit. On the grass, now onto the tarmac. And at Beckett's, there's John Clark's BMW, and he's sliding out sideways. Right across the circuit, slam into him, John Morris's Volkswagen. Well, and this is just the first lap. On they go. And the rest go down Hanger Straight at 150 miles an hour. Rouse is leading, Harvey 2nd, Gravett 3rd. Edwards is up into 4th position ahead of Good. Out of Stowe Corner, down to Club, that's 4th gear, about 95 miles an hour. And Andy Rouse has already got 1.5 seconds lead. It's Harvey 2nd, Gravett, Edwards, Bristow, Good. Out of Club, and Mike Newman goes onto the grass, up to Abbey. Harvey in 2nd place, Gravett in 3rd position, and Rod Gravett, number 21, was the previous winner at Oulton Park and Silverstone, and he's coming up into 2nd place at Bridge, and he's through. Down to 3rd position goes Harvey, Gravett is 2nd, Guy Edwards is in 4th position, Harvey trying to regain his place into the chicane. A solid stream of Sierras up front. Over the line, up to Copse at 120 miles an hour. Rouse leading now by over 2.5 seconds. It's still Gravett 2nd, Harvey 3rd. Edwards, there he is in 4th position. And now we're in car with Guy Edwards, ex-Formula One Grand Prix driver, the man who saved Niki Lauda in the Nürburgring fire in 1976. He's in 4th place here, sister car to Andy Rouse. He's up alongside Harvey, but dropping back a bit. And that is Rob Gravitt ahead of them. And Rob Gravitt is going extremely well in spite of having a down-on-power engine because of his team's misunderstanding of a rules change. So it's down to Stowe Corner, Gravitt in 2nd place. Then it's Harvey. Edwards trying to go through and take Harvey, and he does it. Guy Edwards goes up into 3rd position, and like Andy Rouse, he's obviously back on form after several reverses this season. That's Andy Rouse. There are the men following the leader, and there is not a lot in it for 2nd to 8th places. Gravitt 2nd, then it's Edwards, Harvey, Good in the Black Sierra, Bristow, Hodgetts, and Gerry Van Cowan in 8th position. Bridge. Into the lap, come out of Bridge. That's the new complex, up to Woodcote. And there is Sean Walker 9th, Carl Jones 10th. Newman is now in 11th place because number 3, Mike Newman, goes through and takes Jerry Marnie, moves up into 11th place. And on they go to take Cops again. Lap 3, and Andy Rouse is out on his own. Look at the gap. There is Gravitt in 2nd place, Guy Edwards 3rd, Harvey 4th, Good an excellent 5th after an awful season so far. Bristow, number 6, is in 6th position. Then it's Hodgetts 7th and Cowan 8th. Tim Harvey, don't drink and drive, be a better driver. Round the right-hander at Stowe, down towards Club. Here is Andy Rouse. He's pulling away with a new lap record, 1 minute 38.82, 108.37 miles an hour, leading now by 4.5 seconds, and here's the master at work. Out of Abbey, up to Bridge, down through the gears. 5th to 4th, 4th to 2nd, and that's easy if you're Andy Rouse. Now the Bridge complex. On to Woodcote. Tail dips out a bit into the chicane. Andy Rouse leading, on his way. Now behind him, Gravitt 2nd, Edwards 3rd, Harvey 4th, Good 5th, Bristow in 6th position, and Van Cowan is 7th, past Chris Hodgetts, and Van Cowan's got an active ride suspension on the Sierra, first time. Class B at the chicane, veteran Barry Williams in the BMW, leading Frank Sidner, and Mike Smith is now up to 17th after his spin. We're in car with Frank Sidner, chasing Barry Williams past the grandstand at 120 miles an hour. Mike Smith goes through, and Barry Williams is losing it. Frank Sidner avoids him. Oh, Barry, with all your 50 years of experience. Barry Williams laboriously gets back to racing speed. Netta Lindgren passes him on the left. And Mike Newman, the man who was in 10th position, number 3 in the Ford Sierra Cosworth, the man from Bradford, is in trouble. Out of the race, threading his way through the tar barrier at Bridge Corner. And now, classes C and D men are being caught and lapped by Andy Rouse. That's Alan Minshaw's Volkswagen in front. There is Andy Rouse's Sierra coming up to lap them. Up to Abbey, lights ablaze.
All right, ladies and gentlemen out there in YouTube and Facebook land, this is the VRG Annual General Membership Meeting. We'd like to thank you for joining us out there. This is Ian Wisman. You may recognize me from our VRL broadcasts. I'm running the stream today. Mike Lawton is going to take off and run this meeting here today. We're going to have presentations from the rest of our board. If you have questions during the course of this presentation, don't hesitate to ask in the YouTube chat or email asktheboard@vrgonline.org. We're monitoring that in real time and can forward the questions along to the board. And if there's time remaining at the end, we'll try and answer those. So thanks for joining us this morning, and I'll hand off now to President Mike Lawton.
Thanks, Ian. So the first things I wanted to go over, first of all, welcome everyone to the live stream, or if you're watching this not live, thanks for watching. We rely on our membership and our club to help guide us. The people you see on the screen are your board members, and it's our job to make decisions that benefit the members and racers of our club. And we think that's really important because we are a volunteer club and a nonprofit club. And we definitely want to hear and look to hear everybody's input and suggestions, and also support everybody who might wish to volunteer, because we do need the help. I'm going to go through the agenda real quickly, then talk real briefly about our 2021 schedule, and then turn it over to some people who have reports on particular parts of the club activities that we think are important. So as far as the agenda goes, I'll talk briefly, then we'll have a treasurer's report, the secretary's report, who will go over election memberships, status and statistics, our election of annual officers. Then we'll talk about some initiatives that we have and some ideas and some sort of direction that we feel like we're taking in 2021. And then we will turn over to questions. We have received a few questions on email, and we've received, and we'll be answering those. And as we go through the conversation, the meeting here, if anybody has any questions, as Ian said, please put them in the chat or send them over email. And at the end, we will take some time and answer what we can. So the other part of the interaction is the Ask the Board email, which we've set up in preparation for this meeting, and we've received some questions on. That's going to stay open and will be monitored by the board. So we would encourage anyone who at any time has a question or a concern or a comment, please use that email, and that will go to several board members, and we will get you an answer as quickly as we can. Okay, so our 2021 schedule, I think most everybody is aware. Our 2021 schedule is pretty similar to the planned 2020 schedule. Obviously, it didn't turn out as many of us hoped, or any of us hoped, but we're going to try it again in 2021 and see how it goes. We start with in the beginning of April 2nd through 4th. We support VDCA's event at VIR, the Wild Hare, and that's a great event at a great track. Good way to start the season. And then from there, we go to the next event that we have is our driving school or driver school, May 12th and 13th, Wednesday, Thursday, leading up to the Jefferson 500. Great way to get involved in vintage racing. You don't need a vintage race car, and it's probably, I'm not sure I can say it's the least expensive, but it's one of the most cost-effective ways to get a outstanding education in racing and car control, even if you're not interested in vintage racing. Then we have the Jefferson 500, which is our signature event every year, May 13th through 16th, which is Thursday through Sunday at Summit Point. If you haven't gone to the Jefferson 500, you should. Then we go to Thompson, Connecticut, June 10th through 12th. That is Thursday through Saturday. And it's a very historic track in what they call the Quiet Corner of Connecticut. No, actually, I'm wrong. The Quiet Corner is the northwest corner. This is the northeast corner of Connecticut. So we'll be back to the Quiet Corner later in the year. But anyway, it's in Thompson, Connecticut, close to the Massachusetts border. Then we go to PVGP's pit race event, July 15th through 18th. Great track, expanded 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. A lot of fun to drive and should be a great event at Pit Race. Then we co-sanctioned the Lime Rock Historic Festival Labor Day weekend at Lime Rock, and this will be the second year for that event under our co-sanctioning. I think it's the 30 some odd year of the actual event. We very much are looking forward to seeing that event grow and working with Skip and the VSCCA and making that event even more successful as we go forward. Then October 15th through 17th, we'll be at Watkins Glen for our annual Watkins Glen race. The same weekend as this past year. And if you haven't been to the Glen, again, a great track. We're very proud of the opportunity and very supportive of the opportunity to race at Watkins Glen. And then we finish the season in late November, the 19th to the 21st at Summit Point again with the Turkey Bowl, which is a more low-key event, but a great way to finish the season and an excellent event. That's my part. I'll turn it over to Scott Jansen, our treasurer, to talk a little bit about how a nonprofit group manages their finances.
Okay, I'm Scott Jansen. I took over as treasurer from Cal Trumbo about a year ago. Cal left me in good shape to go forward. So this is first of all, if you're not interested in numbers, I'm only going to bore you for about 5 minutes. And if you are interested in sort of how the club works financially, that's really what I'm going to talk about. So first of all, how much money do we have? Well, at the end of December 2020, we had $105,000 in the bank, and we're currently up to about 118 as membership dues for 2021 are starting to come in. So you might say, well, why do we have so much money? Seems like a lot for a nonprofit. And I'll answer that in a couple of ways as I go through this. But first, there are two sources of revenue for the club. There's membership fees, and there are entry event fees. And there are two sources of expenditures, essentially. There are administrative expenditures and there are event costs. So back to the money. First of all, it's working capital. And this is pretty much the high point in the year. And it starts to decline from here and then builds again, ebbs and flows. But the cash balance drops as event costs and deposits for track rentals are paid before the revenues start coming in from the events. So 4 events in 2019, and I'm going to talk about 2019 because it's sort of our last normal year. The Jefferson 500, Thompson, Watkins Glen, and Turkey Bowl required over $50,000 in track and catering deposits alone. And the total event costs for those 4 events were over $260,000. These are the events we have cost risk for in our schedule, and I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But you can see what we have in the bank is far less than our total cost of operation in the year. So the money serves 2 purposes, as I said, working capital, but the second one is it's insurance against unprofitable events. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But from a membership standpoint, generally membership dues cover the administrative expenses, which are insurance, advertising, VRG merch, meetings like the Vintage Motorsports Council annual meeting, and they help us build a little bit of a cushion against event losses. So again, 2019, though, for the membership fees, 2020 is pretty similar. 2019 membership revenues were $54,000, and operating and admin expenses were $37,000. Magazine advertising was about half of that in 2019. So you can see there was a bit of reserve left over, and that helps us a bit of cash profitably from membership fees, and that helps build our reserve. From an event standpoint, overall, we're pretty pleased when events make a little money, but we plan for a break even across all the events for the year averaged together. So I'll give you a bad example and an average example. In 2018, events lost $65,000 in aggregate for the year because we had so many that were rained out. Jefferson was rained out, a couple of others, there were big rain events, and we had very poor turnout. And in 2019, which was kind of an average year, where again, all of our events, the club made about $13,000 in profit on the events over costs. And in 2020, with only 2 events, Watkins Glen and Turkey Bowl, it was a little better than break even, maybe $5,000 or $6,000 in aggregate. So why we need a cash reserve, right? It's essentially a rainy day fund. And one of the primary reasons back a year or 2 ago for some of the schedule shifts was to lessen the club's exposure to events where it is on the hook for losses. The Wild Hare has no cost exposure. Thompson's been restructured with track ownership to lower our cost risk. Pittsburgh has no cost risk, and Lime Rock has no risk. So this restructuring of the club and of the events in 2020 stood us in very good stead. And hopefully we won't need it, but in 2021 we're equally well protected. So we have kind of a mix of events where we're really on the hook for profit and loss, and events where we're participating and administering and helping run the events, but we don't have that exposure. So I guess I'd sum up by saying overall the club's in good financial shape with a pretty risk-averse schedule, but we hope to build our reserves further to give us more flexibility and more downside protection. One of the questions that came in the last couple of days was, what should our reserves be? And the board set a target about a year ago of $150,000. Basically kind of give us a 50% cushion over what we think we need as working capital throughout the year. And I'll be looking at that again throughout the year as we go through it, but that's generally our target. So we're hopeful that in the next 2 years, assuming things go reasonably well, we get back up to that target, but we're not there yet, and it'll take us a bit of time. So with that, Michael, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So the next report will be from Niall McCabe to talk about, or to give his secretary's report. So Niall.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things I wanted to introduce is to talk about the new officers and the directors that actually run the club. We have a series of directors, and then from them we select a president, a vice president, and so forth. So after our election, most recently, our new president is Mike Lawton, who was just talking. Our vice president is John Wood. He's a new member to the directors board. Me, Niall McCabe, secretary. And finally, Scott was reelected as treasurer. And in addition, we have other directors. John Wood was added to the board of directors. We have Butch O'Connor and Graham Long, who were re-voted on. And then we already had other directors who were not up for a vote this year. That would be Paul King and Keith Lawrence. They're already on board. We have sort of a rotating arrangement so that we never have all new people all at once, which I think works out good. I just want to mention something else too. Although we have a board of directors and officers, we also have a large number of volunteers. The club has really good synergy. So we have people that volunteer on membership, on the drivers committee. We have a virtual racers league that's run by 2 of our members. We obviously have a driver school, a marketing group. We have a Formula Ford and a Formula V group, a person running regalia, trying to think of all the people, a person who does tech seminars, tech inspection, eligibility committee, a person who does operations with flagging and communication, and then all the event chairs themselves that actually run the events. So there's a whole group of people besides the elected officers that work. The group is really amazing because of that, because there's so much synergy. There's so many people that kind of step up. I just tell you from my own experience, it's really a pleasure to work at VRG because so many people have been willing to kind of step up and do the work of the organization. Part of my other job today is just to talk about membership. And I have to thank my friend John Faulkner for some of this information because he provided it to me. People often ask how many members are in the club, and it's kind of a hard thing because it's a moving target. but in general, we have about 700 paid members per year, roughly. Now around this time of the year, actually around January 25th, we have less than half of that. I think in the winter, people just kind of forget about membership dues and they kind of let it go. So, in recent years, we'd have 300, 280 members. This year, actually, fully paid members by January 25th, we had 315. So we're up a little bit. What happens when our Jefferson 500 event comes in, and to some degree, even the VIR event before that, we get people that start to sign up because they've forgotten, and they'll sign up for their membership, pay their dues. So right around the Jefferson 500, we'll end up with close to 500 members. And then it's kind of a rolling thing from there. It kind of keeps on going. So, by sometime, towards the later part of the year, we'll end up with our full 700 members paid. And then that'll diminish and kind of roll on and off again as we go on through the year. Membership is obviously a key part of funding, as Scott just mentioned. That's where a lot of our startup capital comes. So we appreciate it when people do sign on early. That's my report on membership and the officers, Mike. So I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Niall. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk a little bit about are some of the current issues and initiatives that we're working on and that the club is facing. So the first thing, obviously, on everybody's minds, unfortunately, these days is COVID. How does that affect? Obviously, it profoundly affected our 2020 schedule. Time will tell how that affects our 2021 schedule. Hopefully not significantly, but that could change. John Wood's going to talk a little bit about COVID and safety with respect to COVID as we go forward into the schedule for 2021. So, John?
Yep, thanks, Mike. Things on the COVID front are, I'd say, a little bit mixed. Obviously, 2020 was a tough one for us and everybody, racing and otherwise. When I say mixed, here's what I really think about. The current daily infection rates on a national level have come off their peak right after the holiday period, and that's a good thing. As we sit here today, the national infection rates are about the same levels they were when we ran our Turkey Bowl event in mid to late November. But as we sit here today, the national infection rates are about 2.5 times higher than they were when we ran the events at Lime Rock and Watkins Glen. So, we're going to keep an eye on that. Things are expected to get better as the vaccine rollout continues, but I think that's really going to take many months. So I think we all have to be prepared for and plan for continuing to implement CDC guidance requirements with respect to masks, social distancing, disinfection, use of the electronic, payment and registration processes and so forth. These are the same procedures and protocols that we used for the events we did run in 2020. And I think we've been able to demonstrate that we're able to, implement these protocols and still have a really great race weekend. Many of you might even have started the process of getting vaccinated, and I think that's great. But even if you do have the full vaccination by the time we run the events, all of these, CDC recommended protocols are going to remain at least for the foreseeable future. And of course, we'll monitor this and see how long that goes on. But that's where we are with COVID. Mike, shall I just transition to the next topic that I wanted to cover today?
Sure, go for it.
Go for it. Okay. So one of the things that we've been kind of thinking about is how do we leverage the VRG brand? How do we connect and engage with our current membership, as well as attracting other racers to join race events with VRG? We have a small team that we put together. It's Joe Teplitz, Christian Berzins, Keith Lawrence, and myself. We've been kicking around some ideas, and we've kind of defined a few key elements that are I kind of think are linked together in this regard. The first I'll just talk a little bit about is advertising and marketing. We are, trying to step back and rethink, how do we advertise? What is an advertisement? What are the core messages that we want to get across in that process? Schedule, seems to be something. Question on the table is what else? So we're looking at that. We have begun some thoughts around targeted marketing. So what do I mean by targeted marketing? Well, we've got a number of different race groups, right? We've got small bore, open wheel, the Formula Ford group, medium bore, large bore. In the recent past, the board has expanded the eligibility to include production cars through 1989. There's been a little bit in the past about communicating that. What we've tried to do is actually do more. And very recently, we distributed a press release on VRG expanding the eligibility of production cars through 1989. We got it in the hands of all the typical media outlets that we connect with. And just in the last week, we've had some pretty good coverage through Grassroots Motorsports and Vintage Motorsports. Hopefully you've seen those. If not, go look for them. What I find really encouraging is this was a targeted marketing effort specifically on expanded eligibility through for production cars through 1989. The reader comments to this press release have been very favorable. So I think it's starting to connect with the target audience that we were hoping it would connect with. So hopefully we'll see some of those people start joining. We have to think about, well, how we are targeting other groups like large bore potential Trans Am type vehicles, also Formula V, and small bore at the same time. And then, of course, I think the model that our Formula Ford group has put together is great, and you look back over the last 5+ years, what they've been able to do and how to grow that group. That's just a great model, and we want to try to do something similar in other groups. Mike mentioned that, well, maybe, I don't remember if Mike mentioned this or not, but one of the other elements here is merch. We're exploring a new way to, think about merchandise. We haven't really made a final decision yet, but we're exploring a more efficient order to delivery process, and refreshing and potentially updating and offering some additional types of merchandise. An example of that might be the type of t-shirt that we provided at the Glen event back in 2020. That's what I'm wearing today. There's a nice photo on the back that I think has been favorably received. So we're exploring the idea of doing a little bit more in that way. Social media, how do we connect with our existing membership and others that are interested in what we do? We're just going to rethink, how do we utilize these social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, others to, share more broadly who we are, what we do, and how we take our cool cars to race safely with great friends. We're kicking around the idea of, developing some sort of brand ambassador type of process where any of us are attending a race event with another club, a non-VRG event. How do we more visibly represent the VRG brand and encourage either other racers from other clubs or spectators that are interested in exploring how to get into vintage racing? How do we just, make it easier to invite people to have those conversations with some of our brand ambassadors? We're going to, take a look at the VRG website. I think it's great. There's always an opportunity to, think, is there something we can do a little bit more or better? We certainly want to make sure all the information that we're providing on the website is up to date and accurate. I'll simply say that with the exception of the press release that we've already sent out and what I talked about with it being published in Grassroots and Vintage Motorsports, very few decisions have been made and very few actions have been put into motion at this point in time. But I just wanted to let you know this is something we're thinking about, we're working on. So if you have any ideas or input that you'd like to share, please reach out to Joe Teplitz, Christian Berzins, Keith Lawrence, or myself. So that's what we're doing, and hope to receive some input from y'all.
Thanks, John. So a couple of other topics to discuss. There are initiatives or things that are going on that we wanted to make sure everybody was aware of. There's a Vintage Racing League on iRacing, and it's been very successful. I think a lot of people having a lot of fun. Vintage racing, or not vintage racing, maybe racing some more modern cars and very different cars at very different tracks. So if you're into if you're into virtual racing, and or might find the virtual racing to be interesting, I highly encourage you to check it out, because it's a great opportunity to participate in virtual racing without maybe some of the large fields and aggressive driving you might find elsewhere. So another thing I wanted to go over was membership and logbooks. We have tried to, we're going to, as we go forward in 2021, we're going to try to take advantage of some opportunities to streamline the process of membership and use Motorsport Reg as sort of a background for our membership database management. And I wanted to recognize, Niall already called him out, but John, who spent quite a number of years managing our member database and sending out membership cards and tracking medical reports, and doing quite a bit of organizational work on a volunteer basis, managing our membership. We're hoping to let automation do some of the heavy lifting there going forward, and make that a little bit easier. Also, as when I mentioned logbooks, we've had Ralph Steinberg has done a fantastic job of managing the logbook process for quite a number of years. We're going to try to change that a little bit and have logbooks for cars available by appointment at all of our races, so that rather than handling a logbook through the mail, if a VRG, if a car is looking for, or an owner is looking for a VRG logbook, they would fill out their paperwork, make an appointment with the tech inspector, and the tech inspector would have the ability and the material to issue a logbook on the spot at a race. We think that's going to help people move through the logbook process a little quicker and be more interactive on a face-to-face basis. So those were the initiatives I wanted to cover. Next up are some questions that we've already received. And I think I saw one more in the email, which I will get to. But the first question that we wanted to respond to was sent in wondering about our medical requirement for licensing and for racing. SCCA and SVRA notably have waived the medical requirement for racing in 2021, and VRG has not. And there are quite a number of reasons why we have decided not to. But again, John, if you want to take some time and talk about what our thought process was and what our reasoning was, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I guess I would start by saying, or covering sort of the fundamental objective of the medical exam in the first place, and we require a medical exam every 2 years just to have your personal physician evaluate your both physical and mental capacity to operate a race car at high speeds with other cars on the track, and over time, things can change. And that's why we have a requirement to have this assessment updated every 2 years. I think the request for waiving or extending the medical exam is in the context of COVID, right? And if this was a question that we got back in the late March, April, May, June timeframe of 2020, I think we would all understand it, because it was very restrictive in terms of what businesses could operate, and that also included some health of the healthcare community. Since then, though, a lot of well accepted practices have been put in place to prevent transmission and protect people from one another. As we sit here today, the vast majority, I'm not saying all, but I think the vast majority of the healthcare community has already been vaccinated. And a visit to your doctor's office is probably one of the safer places to go, because the healthcare community is among the most well-informed about the virus transmission and protective measures, and their operations are probably going to be among the safest. And again, the vast majority of the healthcare community has already been vaccinated. The question, or this issue, is one that the board took up and discussed and debated and made some decisions on. It was just a sense that where things are right now with being able to safely make a visit to your physician, and going back to the original fundamental purpose for the medical exam in the first place, there was strong consensus by the board that we ought to just continue with this requirement to have the medical exam on a 2-year basis. So that's where we are.
Thanks, John. So the other questions that we've gotten, I would kind of lump in together into a broader discussion. We received a question to call them out specifically. Would VRG consider going back to New Hampshire Motorsports Park? Why does VRG no longer run at New Jersey Motorsports Park? Did we try to move our Watkins Glen event from mid October to the beginning of October? And what happened? Would we consider, since Watkins Glen is such a large portion of our event operations budget, would we consider moving Watkins Glen now or in the future? And if so, what would we do? What track would we go to? And I think that all of these questions are very important and certainly make sense. I think that what we as a board have to weigh is that we have, and it was mentioned earlier, in order to run an event, we really need 3 things. And those 3 things in order are: we need the event, we need the event to be staffed by volunteers. And there's probably any event, as the event chair for Watkins Glen, I can tell you, for Watkins Glen, we do not engage the flaggers. Those are provided to us by the track. So that cuts back on the volunteers, but it's certainly, there's probably 20 to 30 people who are volunteering time in order to make the Watkins Glen event work. I know the Jefferson 500, it may well be double that. And those volunteers, we kind of feel as a board that we can't ask more than one event a month, really, through the season. That's a reasonable sizing for our schedule, in order to not burn out our volunteers, and in order to continue to provide the type of racing and the type of structure that we feel is important. So that's the first thing we need. Second thing we need is some way to, as Scott mentioned earlier, to have the event make financial sense for us, which means the third thing, we need people that want to come and race. And, you know, we all have our favorite track. We all have our favorite track that might be near our house, or might be far away from our house. But ultimately, for VRG to be able to fund an event and run an event, we need enough people to enter that event that we can essentially manage the finances of that event in order to have it be viable for the club, either short term or long term. And that's how we make our decisions as to what events we go to. New Hampshire, to call out one, actually, that is the closest track to my house. And New Hampshire had a vintage event for quite a number of years. And it was, in fact, one of VRG's very first events was the New Hampshire Vintage Festival back in 2003, 2004. Attendance declined to the point where the event was getting probably 30 to 40 cars, and asking our volunteers to make the trip to Loudon, New Hampshire to support a 30 to 40 car field is probably not the most beneficial use of our volunteer resources to the club as a whole. That's why we decided several years ago not to continue with New Hampshire. New Jersey, similarly, there's a lot of people. That's a great location in the middle geographically of our club, and we felt like it'd be a great place to have an event. Unfortunately, we never came up with a business plan for that event that made sense based on the number of entries we got compared to the cost of the track and various other factors. There was also some difficulty in finding an appropriate schedule time for that event because of some of the other events that we already had on the calendar. We're constantly evaluating this and looking at options. Going back to Watkins Glen, we did try. I personally tried to negotiate an earlier date for us in 2021. I was unsuccessful. We are offered the same date in 2021 that we had in 2020, and we have accepted that date with a promise that our date in 2022 will be earlier in October. So our intent is to continue to support that event if we can get it moved a little bit earlier into the schedule. And that is really all I wanted to talk about the schedule. Why don't we do this track? Why don't we do that track? Why do we do this track? And the volunteers. So, Ian, have there been any questions?
I don't know. I mean, maybe that's something we need to take offline. I'm not, maybe I need to learn a little bit more about what that really would be. And, at the end of the day here, what we're looking for is the physician to make an assessment about the individual's mental and physical capacity. That's what this is all about. So if there's a way to do that that doesn't require somebody to physically go into the doctor's office and have the traditional face-to-face, I guess I'd like to learn and talk more about that. And I think that's something the board would consider.
Thanks, John. Just to repeat the question, because I may have had my mic turned off for the stream, so everybody watching didn't hear it. That was Ralph Padgington's question. What if we wanted to do telemedicine, and can we submit the medical form without the doctor's signature? We'll move along now that I believe I have my mic working. Mark Wining asking, can you say more about allowing some of the newer cars to run without fuel cells as mentioned in your recent announcement? That is a key requirement that has prevented me from joining you.
Yeah, this is Jim Karabanis. I'm the chair of the VRG Eligibility Committee. I can take that question. If you look at section 2.1.3 of the VRG rules, there's a category called improved touring. And this is basically a section of cars from 1980 to 1993 that fit ITA, ITB, and ITC specs for the SCCA. So if your car meets that criteria, those cars can run without fuel cells. If you have specific questions about a specific car or make, feel free to send me an email. It's jim@vrgonline.org, and I'd be happy to work with you.
Jim, could I just add a little bit?
Sure.
Go ahead, John.
Jim, I was going to ask for a little bit of clarification on, the rationale behind not requiring fuel cell on those cars. And my understanding is that by the time the original manufacturers got into the design and production in the 80s for this group of cars, the safety standards were at a much higher level in terms of the monocoque design, the placement of the fuel cell, how the fuel or the fuel tank, how it's protected and so forth. So the resulting position of the fuel tank in those cars is at a much higher safety level than cars of the 50s, 60s, and early 70s and so forth. So I think that's part of the rationale. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. In essence, the stock fuel tanks in the cars that are approved for improved touring puts the fuel tanks in front of the rear axle in a very safe location. There are cars in the 80s that don't have the fuel tank in front of their rear axle, but those cars aren't permitted and they're not listed as part of the SCCA GCR. But yeah, you've summarized it very well, John.
Okay. If there's nothing further on that topic, we'll move on to our next question, submitted by Eric Russell, asking, has VRG looked into rain insurance?
We have. And in fact, we had rain insurance for one of the days at Watkins Glen, not this year, but in previous years. What we found with rain insurance is that it's an interesting conversation, because if you track our costs and our revenue against those costs, what we need is people to register for the event and come to the event. And we give full refund if someone chooses for any reason not to come to the event. And so while rain is unfortunate and rain is not pleasant for anyone really, or for most, let's say, some people I do know like racing in the rain, but that's, their own decision. It doesn't affect our bottom line per se. unless somebody sees a forecast and says, gee, you know, it looks like it's going to rain that weekend, I'm not going. And the way the rain insurance is worked out, there are tables based on the amount of rain and the cost projected based on average annual rainfall on a given day in July. And so it really becomes, when we took a look at it, it really became a little bit like a hedge fund in a way that we could buy rain insurance, which might put money back and cover some of the cost of the entries who might choose not to come if rain was predicted. But if unpredicted rain came, it wouldn't affect either our entry fees, our total entry fee, or our bottom line for the event. It's a long way of saying the rain insurance also was very expensive. And you could either get your rain insurance for one of the days or all of the days. And you had to specify what your payout amount was, whether it was an inch of rain or half an inch of rain or some amount of rain. And when we put all the numbers together and we looked at sort of historically whether it made sense, what we found was it did make sense, but only in a very few instances of history, where if we had guessed right and we had picked the right day, it would have put $8,000 or $10,000 back into the event budget that we probably lost because people decided not to come due to the forecast. And we didn't think any of us were good enough at forecasting the weather. And especially now that Storm's not on the board anymore, he's chosen not to run. We are all feeling like we are not capable of outsmarting the actuaries in this instance. So that was the answer.
It's a very thorough answer there, Mike. Ready to move on from the rain insurance?
Sure.
Okay. Mike Harmuth asking, any chance of reopening up or opening up the tire specs, Hoosier R7, for example, to get more entrants?
Yes, I can take that as well. So the tires are, well, there's a few reasons why we've gone with treaded tires. For the most part, with at least the older cars through the 70s, most of them only ran on treaded tires back in the day, and we've been trying to recreate a certain period of time. With the newer cars, we've made the same requirement because we want the cars to be compatible on track, and it's a safety issue. It's also an economic issue because with the treaded tires, you can run just as safely in the rain, whereas if you're running a slick tire like an R7, you're going to need multiple sets of tires. So a treaded tire allows you to run a single tire in multiple environments. That said, I don't see the fact that we have treaded tires as a barrier to entrance. Our tire rules are very much compatible with the majority of vintage clubs across the country. And if you want to have a set of slick tires to run with another club, that's fine. I think most of us have multiple sets of wheels in all of our trailers. And I'd argue that I'd love for you to purchase a set of treaded tires and come join us on track and try what we're all about.
Okay.
I would also point out, on top of what Jim said, that event chairs have the opportunity to allow non-compliant cars to race with us on a trial basis. So if there's a particular exception that's being requested or needs to be made, then the arbitrator, so to speak, of that is your event chair for the event that you're talking about. You know, our hope is somebody who comes on, if they're given the opportunity to come race with us on their Hoosiers, they like what we're doing. At some point, they're probably going to have to replace those Hoosiers. Maybe they might choose something that's a little bit less aggressive and opens up the opportunity for them to race with multiple groups.
And just to add some feedback from Mike, who's watching on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, Mike. He's just like to pass along. He's asking for some HRG guys who can't get decent tires for their cars. Moving on to our next question.
One more thing, Ian. Mike, please have those folks reach out to me, because I haven't found a production car yet where we haven't been able to find a suitable treaded tire. So if they reach out to me, I'd be happy to help point them in the right direction.
Or ask the board at vrgonline.org, and that will find its way to Jim if they can't find Jim elsewhere.
Nice plug there, Mike. We'll move on now. From Facebook, we have Chris Shoemaker asking, replying specifically, I think, to the comments around New Jersey Motorsports Park and New Hampshire. So first, at New Hampshire, we got paid per car, and I never recall a year with only 40 cars. Therefore, the premise I find false. If we can get a similar arrangement, would it not make sense to start building a presence again? Additionally, with New Jersey Motorsports Park, I submit the same argument, but there we did pay. I just do not think the club marketed well on that event. If we look at these events independently, then this makes sense. But if we look at the events based on annual overall revenue, parenthetical original intent, then we should be able to accommodate some extra tracks. And that is the end of Chris's comment/question.
I don't have an answer for this. I guess I would just, when I think about the questions of going to other tracks, as Mike said, we're running about one event per month from April through November. If we add tracks, I think we have to think about subtracting something from the existing schedule, because I think we're kind of at a capacity in terms of our ability to properly run the events with the number of people and volunteers that are required to do that. So I don't know if anybody else has comments that are more specific to New Jersey and New Hampshire, but I do think we need to think about the subtraction part if we're going to add something.
Yeah, this is Butch O'Connor. As the former EC event chair of the New Jersey event, part of the problem you have when you're trying to schedule events at any track is you need an available date from the track. These tracks are busy. They have something going on almost every weekend. We try to run 3-day events at most of our events. And to get those 3 days in a row at most of the tracks is somewhat difficult. You add to that fact that you, as John was saying, our schedule as it's set right now is a pretty damn good one. We have an event pretty much every month except for August. So we really don't have room in the schedule to put another event. Speaking specifically of New Jersey, we maintain contact with them. I do every, all year long. I run SCCA events at P all season long. So the door is open if it came to be that we had room in the schedule. But in addition to that, we need to have the support of the drivers. That track, in order to break even, which is what we typically try to do, it requires between 120 and 130 entries. We hadn't gotten that the last year we ran there. We fell off by, say, 20 entries, and 20 entries means the difference between break even and losing 5 figures. So you have to be very careful on the financial side when we make these decisions. But the door is open. If we had enough interest, perhaps we could go back there. If we had room in the schedule, perhaps we'd go back there to New Jersey or any other track that people find interesting.
Butch, I would just, I agree with everything you just said. I would also maybe add the comments about other tracks, just remind people that very few things are forever, right? So the schedule we have this year is a pretty damn good schedule, but 3 to 5 years from now, who knows what it'll look like. And if the track doesn't make the event available to us, or there's other things that come up that cause us to take something off the schedule, of course we're going to be looking at other tracks, to fill that gap in the schedule.
Agreed.
I'll just chime in to respond briefly to Chris's point on New Jersey. For me, it's an hour from my house. It's the closest track to me. But looking at the history economically, going back to 2010, despite Butch's best efforts, we lost more money than we made on we lost more money. We lost money more years than we made money, and in aggregate, we lost money. So to some extent, for whatever reason, I would kind of say the club the members have spoken. They had 10 years of opportunity, and they didn't support it enough to make it profitable.
Yeah, this is Jim. I just want to add one other thing on New Jersey is that, as Butch articulated, you're kind of stuck with the dates that the tracks are willing to offer. And the only dates that we had for New Jersey put us in direct competition with other major events on the East Coast. So I don't feel like New Jersey ever got a fair shake. I don't agree with the comment that we didn't do a good job of marketing it, because I think we did. But I think the competition that we had with the time slots that were offered to us were just not something that we could overcome. And I think all of us love racing at New Jersey. And if there were an opportunity, if there were a hole in the calendar at some point and a date that the track were to offer, I think we'd all love to entertain going back there. And as Butch said, the door's always open.
One final comment I'd make on schedule and other tracks and other events and that sort of thing. One thing we haven't touched upon is partners. The only reason we're even in the ballgame at Watkins Glen is because we have a good partnership. Originally, it was with the Formula Race Productions, and now it's with BMW. And without that partner, we wouldn't be able to even make a partial go of it at Watkins Glen. I know Butch tried really hard to find a partner for New Jersey, and by a partner, I mean somebody that might take some track time and cover the cost of that, rather than sort of a co-marketing organization, which doesn't really help with the bottom line. Unfortunately, it was unsuccessful. We weren't able to find a partner for New Jersey. And we continue, we're very happy with our partnership with BMW. We've talked with them about possibly partnering in other tracks. They participate at PVGP already. They are also partners with VDCA at the Wild Hare in April. So they are a good partner for vintage racing and for VRG in general. And if there was an opportunity to work with them at to get into another track that made sense, both financially, and we felt like we could get entries to the point where it would be a good event for us, we would absolutely entertain that. But like John said, I think 2021, we're pretty well set. Not pretty well, we're very well set for 2021. And 2022, of course, is a new situation. And we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Mike. I think we'll segue here to the next question, but just a couple of comments during that response there. One from Mike Harmuth from HRG. He notes that sound has shut out HRG on 3 of the Northeast tracks, New Hampshire currently at 99 dB. So apparently a bit of a limiting factor there for HRG to be in attendance. And also Steve Hyatt, who we all know and love from our events, notes that volunteers are needed to run these events. Jumping back up to a question from Eric Russell, which dovetails into the partners at our events here. So Eric Russell asks, regarding additional or alternate tracks, have we looked into working with other groups to race at the tracks where they host events? The Wild Hare at VIR with VDCA seems like an excellent example. He continues, if we, VRG, could partner with other groups for things like reduced entry fee, might that be a viable way to expand the schedule?
Yes, I think that's something that we can look at, and we do look at. The only point I would, or the only concern I would make, going back to the comment about one event a month, is that, you know, we feel pretty good about the brand that VRG has, and the components of that brand are safety, driver committee, people being responsible for their behavior on the track, and a typical event, an event like the Jefferson 500 requires 2 to 3 teams of driver committee members, which is somewhere around 10 people. Can be more, can be less. So if we're thinking about adding events into the schedule, it's not just the volunteers to do tech, but do we risk diluting the focus that we have on safety, and therefore putting events out there that we can't be proud to put our VRG name on because they're not run in the same safe manner that we feel is important and our entrants feel is important.
Yeah, maybe, Mike, we should also clarify some of the arrangements we have in place right now. So the Wild Hare is an interesting example because it is VDCA's event, and we support it every year as a club. PVGP is a partnership. PVGP is the primary driver there, and we support that event. And Lime Rock Labor Day is the tracks event, and we've been supporting that this last year and hopefully for the foreseeable future. But all that said, if we don't expect VRG members to only attend VRG events, and if there are other tracks that you want to try with other VMC organizations, by all means, we support that. Most of the board members have all raced with other clubs at other tracks that interest us, and that's one of the benefits of having a VRG license, is that you can't participate with any VMC club.
Okay, and at the moment, that's all for questions coming in through YouTube and Facebook. Mike, there was one that came in through email, I think just prior to the start of the meeting today. I'll read that one here. From Dan Pianowski. Apologies, Dan, if I'm mispronouncing your name. Regarding the 2021 schedule, he says, I had heard you were trying to move the Watkins Glen event up to October 1st through the 3rd. Did that not work out, and is the October 15 to 17 date now confirmed? You might be on mute there, Mike.
Sorry about that. The direct answer to that is yes, we were trying to move the Watkins Glen event up to October 1 through 3. No, it was not successful for 2021. The October 15th through 17th date in 2021 is confirmed, and we've paid a deposit against that date. 2022, we have been told that we will be able to move earlier in October, and I intend to hold them to that, let's say.
Okay, and at this time, no further questions from us watching on YouTube or Facebook. There's currently 38 of you out there, and we certainly appreciate you joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat while we're live here. And after the fact, if you're watching this weeks down the road, don't hesitate to email asktheboard@vrgonline.org, and those questions will be forwarded to the board for response.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks everyone for their support and for their questions and for their interest. And feel free to reach out. Everybody, hopefully, you've seen a familiar face on the call here. We're all looking to hear people's thoughts, and really, it's a volunteer club, nonprofit organization. We exist to serve the members, entrants, and the races that they want to attend. So thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of the weekend.
Yep. Thanks, all. This is Ian. I'm going to sign off for everybody here. Certainly appreciate you joining us. And as noted, the YouTube stream will be available on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Vintage Racer Group. It will also be up on our Facebook page at the Vintage Racer Group Facebook page. So thanks for joining us, everybody. We appreciate the comments, the questions, and as noted, feel free to email asktheboard@vrgonline.org. And we'll transition and cut out here. And we thank you for joining us. Everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you at the racetracks.